apply test. Now let's see how can we write the test. Now here in this example we have the functions as just separate functions. The same concept applies if we have a class. Okay. Now just for the sake of example here we have some functions. I don't know where the pointer is. Okay, so we have some functions here. Okay, here's the check list that we've been talking about. And then there's a check uppercase, the check special characters. And then is valid password would call all of them to so that we test the password with all the 3 requirements. Okay, so testing each of these functions would count as unit test. Well, this is not a very big integration, but it's still like it examines the integration of different functions, so you can think of it as integration. Okay. Now let's say we want to create a test case. So we create a function that has a prefix test. So test underscore. Okay. And then the name doesn't matter, but it is recommended that you use the same name of the function that you're testing. Okay, it's like the tool itself is not going to recognize the function you're testing or anything. It's for your own benefit, for your own readability. So when a function fails, you know where to go in order to fix it. Okay, so we see we want to check the check length. Now I created a test case. So a function with the prefix test underscore, and then the name of the function I want to test. And this would be a good test. So the input that I determined in the list here, that would be a good test. Okay, so this one, for example, this is the one that I put as the input. And then the expected. And then in order to get the actual, I just have to execute the function under test. Okay. Now, if these functions are defined as part of a class, what would I need to do? These functions right now are listed like on the script as free functions. If they were part of a class, what do I need to do? How can I execute a function in a class, defined within a class? Yeah, so inside the test function, I would need to create an object and then call the function through that object. Okay. Now here, this assert. So this assert keyword, if I give it a condition, the condition would give true or false. If it gives true, it means that the test passed. If it gives false, then it means the test failed. Okay, so the comparison, the equality comparison is a common way, it's a common case, but it's not necessary. You may want to have, like, you want to have the actual at least equal to the expected. So like you would replace that equality check with a greater than or equal. Okay. So in order to execute this, I would call the apply test with the name of the file. Okay. Now it will give you more information. This is like a screenshot from an older version, but the way it's executed doesn't change. Now we can suppress that unnecessary message by using the -q option. Okay, anyways, regardless whether this information are printed or not, here is the file that was tested, and there is one test that actually passed. Okay, so it did like the execution of the test case, the collection of the actual output and the comparison, and then gave you a report of that it has actually passed. If I happen to do something like this, which is a very common thing, like when you have greater than or equal comparison, oftentimes people ignore the equal sign or forget the equal sign when it's supposed to be greater than or equal. Okay, Now, if I run this same test, it will still pass, even though I know there is a problem. So this test case doesn't reveal the problem, right? That's why we need multiple test cases. We need a suite of test cases that cover different ways of executing the code. All right, now here's a problem right there, but the tests say that it passed. Okay, now if we had a boundary test, okay, so we did put the boundary test, like the exact 8 characters. Now we get the test to fail. Okay, so now we have all the test suites, including the boundary and the bad and the good. So that would give us a high chance to reveal any problems that existed in the code. All right. Now, if there is a failure, it will give you the test function that failed. And like you say, we have 1 failed and 3 passed here. Okay. Now, if you have a good name, you know that this is a call for the check length function, and then you go directly and fix. Okay. Now, when you have like real sophisticated, this is a very simple function to test, right? Functions to test. When you have real sophisticated code to test, you're gonna have multiple test cases. So it would be hard to track if we don't organize them. Okay, so we have the option to organize test cases into test classes. And all what we need to do, if it's in the same script, is just create a class with the test with capital T as a prefix. Okay, now when I say PyTest, when I run PyTest command, it would recognize this as a test class and execute its functions for testing. Okay. Now I organized my test cases into 2 classes just to make it easy for me to handle the test cases. Okay. Now when things get bigger, now you see we have only 61. We have 61 lines, and as we keep adding code and we add tests, it eventually become unmanageable. So it's better to separate them in different files. So we can put the test cases into a test file. And also the convention for the name of the test file should be prefixed test underscore. So if you prefix the name of your module, so the module that has the test cases, test underscore, you don't have to give the file name to the PyTest. So PyTest will look for anything that has a test underscore as the prefix and execute it as test module. Okay, so if you're not using the test underscore, I mean, if you're not calling the entire module test underscore something, and you want the module that has a different name to be executed as test module, you just have to provide it, okay, as an input to that PyTest command. All right, and finally, now depending on how your function is, the concept of a boundary, it's very obvious when we talk about numbers. So number 8 is very obvious when we're talking about numbers. It's not necessarily obvious when we talk about something else. So for example, the check uppercase, what would be the boundary here? Now, depending on the code, if you look at the code, we are looking at the characters 1 by 1. So starting at 0, ending at length. So these would be the boundaries that we're looking at. Okay. If we're looking at the check special characters, now see the way we check for the special characters. I know there's a better way in Python, but I just wanted to have an example way that we have ranges. So whenever we have a range, we have upper and lower bound. Then we need to test the upper bound and the lower bound, not just the. Now when we say when we had the length equal 8, so we have just upper or we have a lower bound. Sometimes you have both upper and lower bounds. Okay, so both those upper and lower bounds need to be tested. Now here, the character, we're testing characters, and then the comparison of the characters is based on the ASCII, right? the ASCII code or the Unicode. So a boundary below this column would be the character right below it in the range. Okay. So that's like, generally speaking, you want to examine both. If you have two boundaries, if you have a range, you want to examine both boundaries at the boundary below and above. All right. So that's the general testing concept. Now I just want to give you a quick example of how would I test the YouTube, like my application, if I was to test my application. So let's say here. So the YouTube, it was my class that accessed the YouTube data source. So here I wanted to have a test module. So I created test underscore YouTube. Now I'm gonna test I'm testing the YouTube class, right? So I need to import it because I need to access the code. So import it, and then I created the test get channel name. Now this is an ID, channel ID I got. This is the channel I post the videos on. Okay, now I know the channel name is line name, all right, and then I can test it based on that. So right now, if I say py test, without giving it any name or anything, it will look for any file that has test underscore as a prefix and execute it as the test module. Okay, and there is one test there that actually happened to pass. All right. Now, if it failed or if it gave some like something else other than, I'm just gonna change the expected so that it would fail, or maybe I should change the code. Like the problem I had before when there was a change in the, look, I used a different name. I don't remember the. I missed. I just want you to see a video. So let's say there is actually there. It's good to see that it is possible that the problem in the test case itself. Because just like a human wrote the code that we're trying to test, also a human wrote the test case. So it is possible that the test case is problematic. So here, for example, I'm gonna run. Now it tells me it's failed. Okay, so when I see a test case failing, there are two possibilities here. It's either the original code is wrong, or it is possible the test case is wrong. Okay, now you start examining the test case, make sure it's correct before you examine the code. Is harder to examine. All right. So that is for testing. Now I'm gonna ask you to provide test suites for all the classes of that you use to access the APIs. Okay. For the first. Any questions? Okay, that's all what we have today. Thank you.